Facebook here. Let me make sure my audio is good. Good afternoon. Happy Friday. It's a Q&A Friday with Pastor Paul. We're going to deal with some of the topics that we've been having going on social media and maybe respond to some of the trolls and all kinds of things. So love to know where you're joining from today. And we'll be doing Q&A and dealing with your questions. And you can always ask me a question on my website at our community chat board, pastor-paul.com. We have a drink of coffee, turn on my diffuser, and we're off and rolling. Glad you're with me today. Wanted to show you, I got my little poppet in the pride colors and love it. So how are you guys doing today? Let me know where you're joining from. Hi, Douglas Douglas always says he's from fascist South Carolina, which I'm assuming that's, South Dakota. I'm assuming that's not a town in South Dakota. That's more of a state of being. I'm going to assume that to be true. My friend Holly is here from Ohio, Hani from Idaho, and glad you guys are here on TikTok. Let me know where you guys are joining from. And we'll get the trolls making their comments, and it'll be lots and lots of fun. Oh, yeah, I forgot to put on my hoops today, so we'll do that. Let the Christians go crazy. And so, yeah, our first comment is from 01 Art Vandalay, who says, I'm from the IDGAF plus community, which means I'm assuming he's saying the I don't give a fuck community, which means you're hard-hearted and your humanity was stolen either by your politics or your religion or the combination of both. And I'm sad for you. I'm sorry that that you lack caring for your fellow human beings that much. It's really sad when religion and politics, whoops, I just broke my earring. Where did it go? When our religion and our politics, which are often the same thing, steal our humanity. Geez, I lost part of my earring and it disappeared somewhere on my body or on the ground and I can't find it. Oh, well, we may have to go without then and just not make our Christian friends quite so angry today. They're very, very sensitive. Our Christian friends have very, very sensitive snowflake hearts, and so they get offended very easily. Oh, shoot. I would think I should be able to find this thing pretty easy, and I don't think it hit the floor. Sorry. This is the greatest live ever, isn't it? Where did it go? I wish my dog could smell and find it. Oh, well. Credo. I do know this floor is dirty, though. I need to clean it up. So probably when I change my clothes later today. Well, I'll wear one like a pirate. And we'll see if as we go, we find the other one here somewhere along the way. All right. Jeanette is here from South Carolina. And she says it can be somewhat fascist sometimes. All right, honey, thank you. So let's start with my first topic today that's been flying on Facebook that has to do with the fact that Christianity, I believe, is an imminent threat and danger to folks in the LGBTQ plus community, and particularly the trans community today, while they're being used as political pawns and demonized by the Republican Party, which is literally putting their life in danger. And we saw that in action in Colorado Springs in the mass shooting. And it's interesting that many Christians are in the I don't give a fuck community about that, which shows just how hard-hearted religion can make you and how much it can steal your uh, your humanity. And so I'm going to play a video. You'll be able to see this on YouTube and Facebook. You'll just be able to hear it on TikTok. Yes, evangelical bigotry is absolutely right. It's a religion, I keep saying, that looks exactly like the whitewashed tombs of the first century. Jesus looked at religious, law-based people who said, yes, it's God's grace, and here's the rules you have to follow. And today's Christianity is very much the same type of religion as those whitewashed tombs, and it does steal your humanity and make you really into a not very nice person. And so I'm going to play this video to show, using real comments that I received on Facebook from Christians about the shooting in Colorado Springs. So let me play that video for you now. I think is it this one or this one? It's this one. Okay, here we go. I'm just a Christian trying to love the sinner and hate the sin. Don't tell me I hate gay people. I'm just a Christian trying to love the sinner and hate the sin. Just because I call love between two human beings a lifestyle and use Bible verses from Leviticus to condemn people while I ignore about 600 other Levitical passages for myself, that doesn't make me a hater, does it? And just because I live in indoctrinated ignorance to call queerness a mental health disorder and say I'm just trying to set people free, that doesn't make me bad, does it? And if I say I'm happy that a queer nightclub had a mass shooting because I idiotically believe all drag queens are pedophiles, that doesn't make me dark-hearted. And by the way, can we keep my uber focus on pedophilia between us? It's not that I'm protesting too much. Well, I just don't want people looking behind the curtain in our church Sunday schools and youth camps and youth groups, you know. And if my answer is good when I'm told that not having an affirming family member makes a queer child twice as likely to unalive themselves, that doesn't mean I lack empathy or I'm anti-human, does it? What are you talking about? I'm just loving the sinner and hating the sin, brother. Yes, Christians, all of those responses show you've been dehumanized and made hard-hearted by your bad religion. And you need to come out of your hate and intolerance because your religion is literally killing people. And Jesus would like for you to make that change now, not wait for a few more queer people to kill themselves or another mass shooting happen in a queer club. Guys, Jesus sat with those condemned by the religious, and he was hated by those religious people for not condemning the ones they wanted him to condemn. And today, you religious people, you Christians would hate him for not being condemning enough of the people you want to have condemned. Yes, your religious rhetoric is killing people. Stop it. Yes, it is. Don't tell me I hate. Yes, it is, Christians. And you know what? I have not had a staunch right-wing Christian say, listen, I disagree with your stance, but yeah, it does seem like we're hurting people, and so I'm going to rethink where I'm coming from. Mostly what I heard was those types of comments. Christian people telling me they were happy that there was a mass shooting in an LGBTQ club. The theology is bad theology. I would say this about the hatred of gay people by Christians. And yes, it is hatred, Christians. Don't even try to say it's love. It's not love. It's pure hatred. It's fear of people different than you. It's fear of people that don't conform to your norm. And there are 6 passages in the Bible that can be mistranslated to say God hates queers. 6 only. And I think all of those are abused mistranslated and misunderstood by Christians. And I think somewhat now willfully misunderstood, because you would have to want to make it say that. But let me stipulate, if even those 6 passages say exactly what you want them to say to justify your hatred of gay people, what do you do about the fact that there's only 6? Yet there's hundreds and hundreds, some estimate nearly 2,000 passages that say, seek justice for the poor, the foreigner, the marginalized, which would include the LGBTQ plus community, and the economically disadvantaged. What do you do about the fact that the judgment of people groups throughout the Bible over and over and over again is for not caring for the poor and the marginalized and the foreigner and the widow, not for having gay people in it? 2,000 passages in the Bible versus 6 arguable, if not outright mistranslated and abused passages. I think the "depart from me, I never knew you" verses ought to scare the shit out of homophobic Christians. Because your theology is destroying people. That stat is a fact, that a child, a young person that comes out and shares that they are non-binary or non-cis heteroconforming to their family, and if they don't have an affirming family member, they're nearly twice as likely to ideate unaliving themselves than a heterosexual youth. That ought to scare Christians to death. And I agree with Daniel, who said, don't try to justify your sin. Oh, no, that was Dora. Because, yes, don't try to justify your sin of not being willing to love your neighbor as yourself and not being willing to sit with people that the religious marginalize. Yes, don't justify that sin, because it is the sin that Jesus called out more than anything else: the hypocrisy of law-based, hate-filled religion. Yes, you are in sin. Jesus said of the religious town of Capernaum, Sodom will have a better judgment day than you. Yeah, that ought to scare you, Christian. And I use the quotes around the Christ in Christian because American Christianity has very little that looks like Christ in it anymore. And listen, this is the classic Christian comment when you start challenging their beliefs. This is from Ted. He said, you should stop talking for all Christians. If you have trouble with your faith, then deal with it. Don't project it onto others. See, it's for a Christian who is getting their identity from being part of a sect or a cult of a religion that says we're the only right religion and everybody else is wrong, then all you can do then is start to say, well, it has to be you. We can, that person, because their identity is so built around being included in the indoctrination of their religious sect, anybody who disagrees with their belief system has to have a problem. It has to be your problem. Stop projecting. But the truth is, Ted, it's not me, it's you. It's not me, it's you. Church, it's not us, it's you. You are the reason Christianity is shrinking at record rates in America, because nobody's buying the bullshit anymore. Lisa on Facebook says Christians are essentially saying God made a mistake in their creation. They just don't have the guts to say it the way they practiced it. Now, here's what I would say on that, Lisa. I will have Christians tell me, there aren't any gay people because God don't make mistakes. And I say, if a child is born with a cleft palate, do we say God doesn't make mistakes and like leave them with the cleft palate? If a child has pediatric cancer, do we say God don't make mistakes, brother? Just trust God and his will. That child has cancer for the glory of God. No, we say we have science that can correct issues and help people live fuller, better lives. Just let the child have the cleft palate. That cleft palate will be for God's glory, brother. I just don't like Christians. Do you ever think about what you're saying? I mean, do you ever think about what you're saying? Chris on Facebook says nobody's buying the bullshit anymore. 1,000%. Carrie says if we feel the need to say not all or similar, it only highlights how big the issue truly is. And if standing against bigotry, racism, etc., is offensive, that in itself is a problem. Boy, this is so true, Carrie. I get this from Christians all the time. Well, yeah, there are bad Christians out there, but that's not me or my people. Well, let me tell you something. In this season, Christian, if you're not speaking out against the homophobia of the church, against the anti-humanness of the church, against the dehumanizing and marginalizing of people, against the prostituting of the story of Jesus to a political ideology and a political party, you are complicit to it. It is not a time to be a fence sitter. You are either in that camp or you're against that camp, and you're standing up and speaking against it because it is an aberrant, heretical religion. Guys, Jesus never said one negative word about a gay person. In all of the Gospels, Jesus never said a single word about banning abortion. Not a word. But he talked all the time about religious people putting others in bondage to their religious rules. Nonstop. He talked about your hypocrisy and being blinded by the leaven of bad religion. And so if you think being anti-LGBTQ plus, being anti-queer makes you a good Christian, you need to go back and read the Bible. Now, if Jesus said anything about homosexuality, we can say I think it's in Matthew 19, I may have that chapter wrong. Jesus says, hey, you know something, guys? You know, some eunuchs are made that way by God. Now, we can have a discussion about what a eunuch is, but I think it's very clear, very probable, let me say, that eunuch was a euphemism for an effeminate man. Like you were looked down upon in the culture if you didn't procreate and reproduce children. So eunuch was, of course, a term about somebody that had their testicles removed. But why would Jesus say some of those eunuchs that have their testicles removed are made that way by God? He was talking about effeminate men who were looked down upon in the culture. And he said, you know what? Some of them are made that way by God. They were talking about divorce, and the disciples were like, well, if I can't just divorce my wife for any reason, maybe I shouldn't get married at all. And then Jesus says, let me really blow your socks off here, boys. You know those effeminate men that you make fun of? Some of them are made that way by God. Some are made that way by other humans, and some choose to be that way in service to heaven. And then the only other thing that you could equate at all that Jesus said about homosexuality was the verse I just quoted in 2 different times, he says this to religious people. He says, "Hey, Capernaum, you think you're going to be lifted up to heaven? No, no, you're going down to Hades. And by the way, on Judgment Day, Sodom will have a better day than you." 6 passages that are misused from the Bible to give permission to Christians to hate queer people. 2,000 passages that say, seek justice for the poor, the marginalized, the foreigner, and the economically disadvantaged. I see that comment, and I'm not telling anybody what they should believe. I'm saying you should consider that your homophobia isn't covered by the Bible or by Jesus at all. It's covered by Jerry Falwell and Ronald Reagan and a really aberrant, hate-filled political party. Thank you, Jamie. Repent or dress warm. When we look at the marginalized, 2,000 passages in the Bible that say, take care of the poor, the foreigner, the marginalized, and the widow or the economically disadvantaged. Who were the marginalized of Jesus' day? They were the Samaritans, a race and religion that were hated by the people of Jesus and the religious people of the day. They were the prostitutes, they were the tax collectors, they were the lepers. And what did Jesus say? I'm going to cobble some Bible verses together to tell you guys how bad you are. Or did he say, see that Samaritan woman over by the well? I'm going to go sit with her. Very likely going to cost me my reputation with my disciples, because a man in our culture is not ever to sit with any woman who is not his spouse. Certainly not to sit with a Samaritan woman. And certainly not to sit with a Samaritan woman and not condemn her for being a Samaritan woman. Yet Jesus did all of that. And for doing so, religious people, like some you see in the comments, said, wow, he must be a Samaritan himself and have demons, which is exactly what Christians say today. When you stand up for the marginalized, they say, well, you must be wanting to sin, brother. That's why you're doing this. You just want to sin. You just want to cover your own sin. Well, that's exactly what the religious people of the first century said about Jesus. So, by the way, when you say that about me, I'm like, yes. Whenever somebody comes on and says, false prophet, you're twisting the Bible, brother, I'm like, yes, that's exactly what religious people said about Jesus. I saw that. I love it when Christians tell me, I'm not religious. I have a relationship with Jesus. And then I'm like, okay, good. Then gay people can go to heaven because it's about relationship, not rules. Well, no, you can't be gay and go to heaven, brother. Says so right there in 1 Corinthians 6. Well, 1 Corinthians 6 talks about a whole bunch of other things too that the church doesn't condemn or hate or pass laws against human beings for, like greed. So the same passage would include the person that cheats on their taxes. Why don't you ostracize them from church board leadership or teaching in Sunday schools? Because they tithe a lot of money to the church, and we can't afford to call out all the things in the Bible. So we just choose the ones we want to choose, brother. And we call those out. And when we get to heaven, what we'll tell Jesus is, Jesus, we condemned all kinds of people in your name. Aren't you proud of us? And he'll say, I don't recognize you. We were never in relationship. You seem like you were in a religion, not a relationship. Douglas on YouTube says, whenever someone says I'm cherry picking, I just go, okay, well, let's start from the beginning. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and they changed their turn quick. So here's the truth about cherry picking. Everybody cherry picks the Bible. Hear my words. Everybody cherry picks the Bible. Hear it one more time. Everybody cherry picks the Bible, and Christians are the worst of it. And do you know why everybody cherry picks the Bible? One, we don't know exactly what all the translations are to all the verses. We're making educated guesses on some. And here's the other reason, and the really important reason why everybody cherry picks the Bible, because the Bible contradicts itself. And so you have to choose which part is right for you. Christians use a passage from Leviticus, as I said in the video, to condemn and hate and be homophobic against queer people. There are, I think it's 613 Levitical laws. And so Christians pick the one that they feel really good to condemn and ignore all the rest. 612 commands they ignore for themselves. That's what Jesus called a hypocrite. That's what Jesus said is a person that's eaten so much leaven of bad religion, it has now permeated everything that they are, and they no longer have eyes to see and ears to hear. Christians, you don't know the Bible. You don't know who Jesus was, and you don't know the Spirit of heaven that you call God. You worship something you made up out of your cherry picking of passages that made you feel comfortable, and ignore the rest. Look at all the angry Christians. Chris on Facebook says, I've always wondered why they don't seem to think they will be held accountable for their hatefulness, probably misinterpreting their Bible. Yeah, I just don't think they ever read. It's like, all I have to do is say the magic prayer, brother, and I'm good. I'm going to heaven. And then they just totally skip over the sheep and goats passage where it's like, you didn't clothe me. You didn't come visit me in prison. When did we not do that, Jesus? We condemned gay people all over the place. He's going to say, go goats, get out of here. Thank you, Lewis, for that comment. Watch 1946, the movie, by the way. It's going to be great. And it tells how the word arsenokoitai in the New Testament got mistranslated as homosexuality rather than pederasty. It is, those are cultural terms speaking to what was happening in culture at the time, because Paul, although Paul didn't write all those books that we attribute to Paul, but for our purposes today, we'll say Paul knew that Christians were living in a culture that was not a Christian culture. And so for instance, Romans 1 isn't about homosexuality at all. The admonition of Romans 1 is don't go to the Isis temple down there and worship what is created rather than the creator. It's not a passage saying don't be homosexual. And it's saying, and because in doing so, you enliven temple prostitution, which is an aberrant way to worship, and also it gives over to the unnatural perversion of men and boys sleeping together and all of those things. So Dan Macklin has a great video on this, and he said it's very, very likely that Paul was homophobic and anti-gay, but you cannot make a case to say, well, clearly from reading First Corinthians 6 or Second Timothy 1, God hates gay people. You just can't. That is an assumption of the passage. Somebody mentioned exegesis earlier. That's eisegeting your beliefs into the passage. And again, even if I stipulated those passages to be what you misinterpret them to be, there's 6 of them versus 2,000 that say seek justice for the marginalized. How do you in your brain balance that out? There's not a single verse in the Bible that says life begins at conception. There's not a single verse in the Bible that says it's really important to God to ban the early termination of a pregnancy. Not one. 2,000 verses that say care for the poor, the foreigner, the marginalized, and the economically disadvantaged. And Christians believe being an anti-abortion extremist is a litmus test of following Jesus. What an aberrant and blind, deceived religious sect of people. It's incredible. Holly says Jesus never said hate. He meant not mother, father, wife. No one comes before God. So there's not a single verse in the Bible that says life begins at conception, not a single verse in the Bible that says banning the termination of a pregnancy is a major concern of God's. In fact, in Jewish law, which, by the way, those of you who say Old Testament, what you're really saying is appropriated Jewish Torah that we've culturally appropriated for our religious and political purposes. What Jewish law says, and all of the writers of the Bible would have believed, Old Testament, New Testament, all of the writers would have believed, is what the Jewish law taught, that ending a pregnancy is not only permissible in the case of distress of a pregnant woman, but in some cases, when the very life of the pregnant woman's life is in danger, it is commanded. And distress in Jewish law included financial distress. So if you're saying Jeremiah or Psalm 139 or Luke 1 are anti-abortion passages, you are taking Jewish sacred text and saying, we know better what it means than the writer and all of the Jewish scholars through all of history. We know better. Christians know better than Jews what their sacred text means. No, it was commanded. Just because you don't know anything about Judaism doesn't make it correct. And Exodus 21, is it Exodus 21? It's Exodus 21 or 22. I can't remember. Is a passage about 2 men being in a fight. And if a man makes a woman miscarry, he has to pay a fine. If he kills the pregnant woman, he has to pay with his life. So the very passage in Exodus says the pregnant woman's life is of more value than the fetus. That's in the Bible that you stole from Jewish text and made into your culturally appropriated Old Testament Christians. So I see a comment here. It says, so we are not God's creation. There's nothing in what I just said that says it's not. the straw man responses that come when I say, show me a verse that says God cares about anti-abortion extremism more than anything else, as Christians do in America today. And there's not, and so people, the answer then is either no, Psalm 139 does when it doesn't. Jeremiah 1 does when Jeremiah 1 says, before you were in the womb, I formed you. Not when you were in the womb, I formed you. It says before you were in the womb. But that would require actually reading the Bible and knowing the Bible. And Christians don't want to have to do that. They just want to hear stuff from the pulpit and right-wing media and recite it, which is a sad state of the Christian church today. So if you are an anti-abortionist, particularly a Protestant one, and you want to say Jeremiah 1 says that abortion is murder, then what you're actually saying, if you think about it, now this is going to take thinking, so I know this is going to be tough for you Christians. What you're actually saying is, well, contraception's murder too, because what Jeremiah 1 says is, before you were formed in the womb, God knew you. And Psalm 139 says, when you were being created in the secret place, which was a terminology in Judaism for at the laying of the foundations of the earth, or as God was planning creation, he knew you. So therefore, if you're saying abortion is murder because it's taking a choice of life into your own hands, then you unless you're a hypocrite or not very bright, you have to say, well, contraception is murder as well, because again, you're taking the choice of life into your own hands. Or you live like Jesus and you understand that sometimes people did things in the Bible that we might say, ooh, that wasn't good. And the Bible says, but God understands, the Spirit of heaven understands our journey on earth and has grace for all involved. See, the problem for Christians, when you start following a law-based religion, everything becomes about simple right and wrong, black and white. And because your religious sect is built around agreement, not around community, then the second somebody starts disagreeing with what you're doing, then you become in danger. And so Christians cannot consider or think outside the box of their religious sect, or because if they do, they put themselves in danger of exclusion from their religious sect. And when your identity is built around being included in that community, then that becomes a grave danger, because humans need safety, value, and purpose more than anything. And so for an American cultural Christian today in the white Euro Christian church, being included in that community is their entirety of identity, safety, and purpose. And so to be excluded from that very exclusive religious sect becomes a grave, grave danger. But there's not a single verse in the Bible that says, be extremist in your anti-abortion stance in order to please God. Not a single verse in the Bible that says life begins at conception, and not a single moment in all the Gospels where Jesus said, what God really wants you to focus on is banning the termination of pregnancy. That's what God really cares about. Can you imagine this scene in heaven? Okay, Here's God talking to Jesus. Okay, Jesus, we're going to send you to earth. You're going to be the perfect representation of me, says God the Father. You're going to be my representative on earth. Here we go. You know, banning abortion and banning gay marriage and being homophobic and condemning gay people matters to us more than anything else. It matters to us more than anything else. And number three is getting people to say a sinner's prayer and joining a religious sect. Those are the three things that matter to us. So, Jesus, I want you to go to earth and mention those three things. Never mention them, because they're the three things that really matter to us. Never say them ever. Jesus never mentioned it because it's not a big issue with a big spirit of heaven that can overwhelm sin. Let me put this into a story form for you to help you understand. So, if I were to say a woman had sex with her father-in-law and got impregnated by that interaction, would you say that was a God endorsed moment or a sinful moment? A woman having sex with her father-in-law and getting pregnant. Sin or good? I'm assuming most Christians would say, "Well, that's a sin, brother. We even had a story in Paul's writing where a man was sleeping with his mother-in-law, and Paul said, 'Turn him over to Satan.' So therefore, it's sin, brother." So isn't it interesting that we have a story in the Bible of Tamar, who dresses up and disguises herself as a prostitute and fools her father-in-law into knocking her up? And what does the Bible say about Tamar? That's immoral, that's terrible, that's sin. No, the Bible says that Judah, her father-in-law, said, "Oh my gosh, she is more righteous than me." And when you look at the lineage of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1, there are only 4 women listed in that patriarchal society. They only put 4 women in that lineage, and one of them is Tamar. And out of that fooling of her father-in-law to knock her up came 2 twins, and the eldest of which is in the lineage of Jesus. So Christians, maybe the spirit of heaven sees the world differently than your law-based, legalistic, exclusive, hateful religious perspective. Let's see. Mountain Chicken says, "I'm out of that. Christianity is not a threat to LGBTQ." No, it is. You tell somebody they're an abomination and they believe it and they're not, you've just committed the most grave sin that Jesus pointed to over and over. Jesus came to set people free from the bondage of law-based religion. And Christians in America want to put people back under the bondage of law-based religion rather than relationship with Jesus. The writings of Paul that we attribute to Paul say it this way: "Who vexed you? Who vexed you, you silly Christians, to go back and start to live under a list of rules when you've been given grace? Who vexed you? Who hypnotized you? Who manipulated you? What right-wing media and right-wing pastor did you let soothe your itchy ears to get you back into a law-based religious system when Jesus came to set you free from that?" And Christians today have chosen again to put people in the bondage of law-based religion. Julie says, I don't know the story of Tamar. Okay, the very brief synopsis is Tamar was married to the oldest son of Judah. The son died. Um, and so the tradition of the Jewish household at the time was then the son's wife would then have sex with the next oldest brother. Um, and the child produced by that relationship would be the lineage of the brother that died. So Judah then gave his next son, Onan, to Tamar to have sex with her. And the Bible says that Onan went in and did the pull-out method. He didn't complete the deal. He penetrated, but didn't complete the deal. Yeah, the Bible is full of sex. When people say we need to ban books with lots of sex from libraries, well, the Bible has more sex in it than any book you can find. And so some use this passage to say masturbation was a sin, and they even called masturbation onanism in the old times. But Onan was doing the pull-out method because he didn't want to have, he knew he was next in line for the inheritance of the family. But if Tamar had a baby, that baby would be first in line for the inheritance of the family, not Onan. And so Onan did the pull-out method, didn't do his duty, and so God killed him. And so Judah was then afraid to give his next son to Tamar because he didn't want another son to be killed by God. And so he sent her away. And then when she heard he was coming, she dressed up as a prostitute and fooled him into having sex with her. And again, the pregnancy that resulted from that created the lineage of Jesus, and the Bible called her righteous. And so isn't it funny that Christians lose their shit over little myopic nonsense? Isn't it funny that Christians are like, well, you got to say a sinner's prayer to go to heaven. And you know what? God never changes. He's the same today, yesterday, today, and forever. And then I'll say, well, Abraham didn't say a sinner's prayer. Neither did David, neither did Enoch, neither did Elijah. Enoch got to go straight to heaven. He didn't even have to die. And neither did Elijah. He went to heaven in a tornado, and none of them said a sinner's prayer. Well, that was because it was for Jesus. And so that's how it happened then. Oh, so God does change. God does change. No, God doesn't change. Well, you just said, like, Abraham got to go to heaven under an exclusion that I don't have. That means God changed his purpose. It's like, I just keep asking, like, do Christians ever think about what's coming out of their mouth? Julie says, why doesn't every single church have a seminary library so we can know about a righteous woman? Rhetorical, but for real. Yeah, there's not a lot of churches that teach the story of Tamar. There's not a lot of churches that teach the story, honestly, that Joseph wasn't wearing a coat of many colors. Joseph was wearing a princess outfit. There was another Tamar in the Bible who was a daughter of David, King David. And there's a passage that says this guy was sort of digging on her. So she put on the coat with long sleeves that a princess would wear, the Bible says. And the terminology for that coat with long sleeves is the exact same terminology as Joseph's coat of many colors. And those are the only two times in all the Bible that that terminology is used. So could it be that Joseph's brothers hated him because he was wearing women's clothing and working in the house while they had to be out in the field doing the dirty work? Dave says, I wouldn't go out in a lightning storm, dude. Isn't it funny how Christianity is such a violent, bloody, hate-filled religion? Any disagreement with what their indoctrination says immediately comes with a threat. Well, God's going to strike you with lightning, brother. Look out. Look out. Look out. Look out. Violent bloodlust. Yeah, Joseph was wearing princess clothing. Jacob was the younger brother of Esau. Esau was the big burly alpha male hunter. Yet God chose Jacob, the smooth kitchen worker, to have the inheritance of Abraham and Isaac. David was a poet and a harp player. When Samuel came to Jesse and said, "Bring me all your sons," obscure reference, also the twin, only younger by a few seconds. Yes, he was called heel catcher because he held his brother's foot as they came out of the womb. Joseph's father gave him the coat, and I believe it's because Joseph and Benjamin were the two sons that Jacob loved because they were the sons of Rachel, not of his older wife Leah, his first wife Leah, who he didn't love. He loved Rachel passionately, and her two sons Jacob loved more than the other boys. And he gave Joseph a princess coat. I wonder why. When Samuel came to Jesse and said, "Send me all your sons, I'm going to anoint one of them king," Jesse sends all his sons into the room except for David. Why did Jesse not bring David into the room? Well, there's two theories. And one is that David was a bastard, and the brothers didn't even know David was their brother. They thought he was just a shepherd boy working out in the field for their dad. And you can support this argument by the fact that that David wrote a psalm that said, "In sin was I conceived." And Christians, as they usually do, they take this poetry and make it this entire theology. All of us are born into sin. David said, "In sin was I conceived." And it's very possible that David was saying, my dad had sex with somebody to whom he wasn't married, and I was born, and in sin was I conceived. And the other theory is, for whatever reason, Jesse didn't think David worthy to be king. We know that King Saul was big and powerful, and Samuel's like, yes, he looks the part of the king. And David's oldest brother, Samuel, looked at him and he was big and strong. And Samuel was like, surely this is the one God is going to choose to be king. And the story says that God said, nope, nope. When the sons went off to war, David didn't go. When David got to the battlefield, they said, "What are you doing here? You think you're some big man?" When Saul wanted to put his armor onto David, it didn't fit. When David became king, the Bible tells us he loved Jonathan like a woman, loved Jonathan like a man loves a woman. When David was king, he danced naked in a way that we don't know exactly what he did, but it was so offensive to his wife that she left the castle where she was queen and said, "I'm out of here. I don't want ever be around this guy again." And she never again returned to the castle. She gave up her royalty because she was so offended by what David did. Yet the Bible tells us David was a man after God's own heart. Maybe God looks at human beings much differently than a patriarchal, homophobic religious cult does. Obscure reference says, haven't seen that translation. You haven't? It's called the Bible, and if you read it, it's right there. David danced, his wife was offended, she left the castle and never came back. It's called the Bible. Like, Christians, if you read it, it would help. It would help in the discussions. If you ever actually pick up a Bible and read it instead of just Google verses to use to condemn it, it would really help in the conversation. Therapize asks on TikTok, where do people get the theology of total depravity from? It came from a Catholic priest. It was not a prevalent belief of the early church. The early church was the victorious church, and we will thrive, and we are amazing, and we're fearfully and wonderfully made, and all those things. It was the Catholic Church that then brought in this idea of purity, anything human, anything sexual, the Gnostic belief of, anything of the flesh, not the Gnostics. Oh gosh, who was it? Now I'm getting myself confused. But the people who were like, anything of the flesh is bad. Arianism, that's right. Anything of the flesh is bad. These weren't things Jesus said. These were things humans made up. And it's a bad theology. Clifford, I see Clifford hasn't been around in our live for very long because he just quoted 1 Corinthians 6:9, which we broke down considerably earlier. But so yeah, Clifford, just let me ask you a question off your copying and pasting of a verse without sitting and thinking about what it means. It says greedy there. It says slanderers there. So if a tither in your church cheats on their taxes, do you tell them they then can't be on the board of the church? Do you tell them they can't work in the children's ministry? Because that's greed and it's sin. And it's listed in the same passage that you use to hate and marginalize queer people. So why is it that you choose queer people to hate and give yourself permission to marginalize, and you ignore everything else in the list, and everything else in the list of Romans 1, and everything else in the list of 2 Timothy 1? Because you guys are hypocrites. You're looking for people you can marginalize to make yourself feel supremacy in your religious sect, and to make yourself feel self-righteous because you're told you are depraved, horrible, human, original sinners. And so you have to find somebody to compare yourself to and be better than. Well, I cheat on my taxes, so, and many of the people that give tithes in our church that keep our church afloat cheat on their taxes, so we'll just ignore that one. We'll ignore 2,000 passages that say, don't marginalize people. And we'll choose 6 passages to give us permission to hate a people group. It is the leaven of bad religion that Jesus said makes you blind. Sin marginalizes people. Religion marginalizes people. And you need to go back and read the Bible and see that Jesus despised religion, and he disparaged and mocked, significantly mocked religious people, not sinners. And he was hated by religious people whose beliefs were just like Clifford's or these other commenters here. They hated Jesus, not because he's too much of a condemner and we need grace. He didn't condemn the sinners that flocked to him. He told them that Zacchaeus was a son of Abraham. How can you say that about a tax collector? Jesus, you must be a Samaritan and have demons too. Christians, read the Bible and have an open heart to say, are we more like those religious leaders than we are like Jesus? Because when I read the Bible, you sound a lot like the whitewashed tombs and you sound very little like Jesus. All right, guys, I got to get running. Anything else anybody wants me to deal with? I'm sorry, I don't always see all of the comments. The comments are coming hot and heavy today. The religious hatred is powerful out there. Let me remind you that Deconstruction U is my mentorship program for those who are rethinking your faith, running from the type of angry, hate-filled religious people we've been seeing comment on this feed. If you have left behind your church, but not your faith and spirituality, come check out my website, pastor-paul.com. And don't walk the journey of deconstruction alone. We just had our first group session of our Deconstruction U group, and it was just so beautiful for people to say, oh my gosh, I'm not alone in this journey. So Deconstruction U, I hope you guys will join me for that. And if that doesn't work for you right now, would you consider just subscribing to my page for as little as, let me see, $5.99 a month? You can help support my work, or up to $100 a month. And I know for some of you times are tough and that's not possible. Thank you, Therapies. Good to see you, Rebecca. Love you a lot. For those of you who can, go to my website, and for as little as $5.99 a month, you can subscribe, get cool stuff, and we can hang out together. Love hanging out with everybody. Even you trolls, thank you. You make it exciting and interesting every day. And so I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you boosting my algorithm. And just remember, Jesus sat with the marginalized. He didn't marginalize. And Jesus despised the marginalizers and marginalized them. You religious people who are saying, oh, it's all about grace, but you can't be gay. That's not grace. That's law. And you're living in a law-based religious sect that's forcing you to adhere to its indoctrination to be included in the community. And that's not freedom. That's not grace. That's the bondage that Jesus said his mission was to set people free, set the captives free from bondage of bad religion, to give sight to the blind. And that could have been literally the blind, but also to those blinded by indoctrination and right-wing media. God doesn't hate you because you're human flesh. God doesn't think you're depraved. God thinks you're fearfully and wonderfully made. God is not mad at you. He's only mad at religious people trying to put all of us in bondage to their religion. And even in our culture, trying to do it through civic code right now. But to those of you with eyes to see and ears to hear today, not made angry and hate-filled and exclusive in your religious sect, I give you permission to pursue God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And that command includes an imperative of having to love yourself. And if you cannot love yourself, how do you have a resource of love to love your neighbor? All right, guys. Love you all. Again, pastor-paul.com is the website. Hope you'll check it out. Oh, I love this. I pray the truth is revealed to you, brother, or else you're going to burn in hell, in hell, in hell. No, I'm good. I have found truth. I lived indoctrinated my whole life, and I'm good. Thank you, Lainey, for the compliment for my hair. All right, TikTok. We'll see you guys later. Love you. Pastor-paul.com. Check it out. And YouTube and Facebook. A lot of fun. Love you guys. Have a great day.